I opened my eyes and I heard over my radio, "Get off the runway! Get off the runway! What are you doing? Get off the runway!" There I was in Palatka, Florida. At that moment, I didn't know I was actually in Florida. My brain had reset that much. Now, if you've ever experienced a concussion before, at this point, I've experienced concussion number 3, hat trick. And so I, along with my brother-in-law, Brian Hiller, we went down to go parachuting to get our wings out of this wonderful outfit who I've heard fantastic things about, except they made a few mistakes this time around, obviously. So I was the first one out of the little Cessna. We had gone through all of our training, how to land properly. They call them PLFs, a parachute landing fall. And so I wouldn't necessarily say I was the dummy of the day, because they did drop some sticks to kind of determine where, in fact, the wind is blowing. But I was, in fact, the first living human being to be thrown out of the plane that morning. And so there I was, perched on the edge of the Cessna. I had everything ready. I was going through with the jump master. He was like 6 minutes, and you're supposed to, reciprocate that. 6 minutes, 30 seconds, check equipment, sit in the door. And so I'm doing all these things, and your heart is just going like this. And so I jump out of the Cessna. My parachute successfully deploys, because this is static line parachuting, meaning that I have a tether on my parachute attached to the airplane. So when you jump out, it automatically deploys your parachute. So you're jumping pretty low at 1,250 feet. And immediately your parachute deploys. And that's what I experienced. And it was just this beautiful moment where I was just up there in the sky. It was just quiet. But this was my first time, so my heart was going and there was adrenaline. Well, I had a walkie-talkie on me. I couldn't talk back to the wind talker down below. There was a fellow stationed down there who was giving me directions on the current conditions down there and telling me where to steer my parachute, because you can steer these things. Now, when you steer these particular parachutes, you can go 10 knots, which is about 10 or 11 miles per hour. It's a pretty good clip. Now, this is if there's no wind. If you are going with the wind, well, obviously you're going to be going faster. If you're going against the wind, let's say that the wind is 10 knots going towards you, and you're going into the wind at 10 knots, 10 minus 10, you're going 0 knots. You're basically dropping straight down. So when you land, you want to go into the wind, so when you hit the ground, you basically land at a standstill, and you just collapse and fall over, and you do a PLF, and then you stand up and brush yourself off. Now, we were being dropped over an airport, an active airport with no ACT, air traffic control, ATC, and I was being dropped into this big grassy area, and I heard over the radio some directions on where to go. And I heard on the radio, "Come towards me, come towards me." Well, I didn't know where me was. Apparently my wind talker down below had decided to be in a spot where I had no idea where he was. Now, I don't blame him fully, because I am the pilot of my own parachute and I should take responsibility for flying that parachute. But in this particular case, I thought, well, this guy right here is the master of what he does. He's got like 1,900 jumps. This guy is a legend in the industry. And so I recognized his voice. I was like, this guy's a legend. I got to listen to him. He said, come towards me, come towards me. So I saw the group of people and I started making a beeline. And then all of a sudden I looked over on my left and I saw him right next to the runway, frantically waving his arms. He's like, can you see me? Can you see me? I'm like, he's over there. I gotta go that way. So I immediately turn, which if you turn too sharp in these particular parachutes, it can kind of cause oscillation. You want to turn very, very carefully, which I didn't know this because this is my first time. And there's all these things going through your mind. So I go towards him and I feel the wind catch me. I don't know if he could feel the wind, but I could feel it up there at 300, 200 feet AGL. And so there I was going towards the runway very, very quickly. Before I was going towards the grass. Now I'm going towards the runway. But he's saying, come towards me. And I'm like, I'm going to trust him. And if you look at the video, which Hiller was on the ground filming, you see me all of a sudden turn left. And that's because I realized that I was going to land right on the runway. And I was like, at the last second, do I have enough wind to get over the runway? I did not have enough wind. So I not only landed on the runway and got completely scraped up, there's a scab right there, I've got scabs all over here, I ripped up, tore off my watch, and I hit that so hard in fact, that my helmet, thankfully I was wearing it, looks like you got a cheese grater and just went to town on it. I got knocked out for about 30 seconds, which is a long time to lose consciousness. And that is when I heard the radio, "Get up, what are you doing? Get off the runway, get off the runway," because it's an active runway. And the last thing they want is a guy laying on the runway. So the reason why I got all scraped up is because the parachute was dragging me along the runway like I was a cheese block on a cheese grater. It just ripping me up. And of course, I'm completely out. I'm just being dragged along, and I woke up like, where am I? Whoa. So I remember getting up, pulling my parachute off of the runway, and I started packaging it up, and I looked down, and I'm just bleeding everywhere. And of course, one of my first priorities is stop the bleed. If you've ever been trained in first aid, you want to stop the bleed before continuing what you're doing. So I compress it, so I'm kneeling there. I'm just kind of shaking my head like, where am I? What am I doing? Why am I bleeding? I don't remember any of this. If you've ever been in that situation before, it's a little scary if you don't know where you're at. And then I was like, okay, I'm in Palatka, Florida. I remember that. And then I start looking around, looking at the buildings around me, and I didn't recognize any of them. It's a freaky feeling. It is straight out of the Twilight Zone, you guys. It's so bizarre. So I pack up my parachute, at least I think I do. I don't quite remember that part. But according to the people on the ground, I start to walk towards the wrong buildings, like in the opposite direction. Then I hear a whole bunch of people yelling and waving, and they're like, "Come towards me." I'm like, oh, okay. Now, one thing that you need to know about me, even though I have a concussion, evidently I'm a great liar. So I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna go in that direction towards those buildings. I mean, if you want to go towards those buildings, the buildings I had been hanging out in for days upon end, and for some reason I didn't know where to go. So they did have medical guys there. They came and they checked me out. They asked me all sorts of questions. You know, the classic questions: what year is it? Which was really hard to get. Who's the president? Which was very, very difficult to get. It took a lot of concentration. So even right now, my memory is kind of a little shaky. It takes a little bit more concentration to remember, like, oh, it's such and such's birthday, or I need to do such and such. I kind of have a checklist that I go through each morning that I fill out so I can keep myself on track. Otherwise, my little undiagnosed ADD brain would probably go crazy. So here's what you need to know about concussions. Yes, I'm going to preach at you for just a moment here. If your identity is in yourself and you're clinging to your memories as your form of your identity, you're going to be a very miserable person. I say this because once you put your identity in something bigger than yourself, and in this particular case, it's God, the God of the universe, Jesus himself. Even if I were to get early onset Alzheimer's, which I hope I do not wish that upon anybody. It's absolutely heartbreaking. If you've ever had a loved one go through Alzheimer's or memory issues, it's so heartbreaking. But if you know that they are preserved in the arms of Jesus, and that their identity, first and foremost, is a Christian, then you don't have to necessarily, if you yourself are losing that memory, let it go. Let it go. And I was still at peace. Even though I barely knew where I was at, I still knew that I was a Christian and that I loved Jesus with all my heart, and that God had me. He had me exactly where he wanted me to be. And to have that peace, you can't get in any other philosophy, any other drugs, anything else in the world. So I encourage you, if you are on the edge about, like, you know, are my memories, are my identity, maybe you have a bunch of memorabilia in your house, or maybe you cling to little knickknacks that you put in your house, or maybe you have a ton of photos and you just get this horrible feeling, what if all these photos were deleted, or they just burned up in a fire someday? And you would probably have a horrible feeling. Sure, I would have that horrible feeling, but does it keep you up at night? Does it worry you to the point where if you don't preserve these memories, then you're losing a part of yourself? I encourage you to seek God and put your identity in him, and not your memories, and not things that you can control, but give it up and give it to God.